Good day, sir. This is Marilyn Lim, and this is my video explainer for comparative government and politics. Comparative government and politics provides an introduction to the wide, diverse world of governments and political practices that currently exist in modern times. Although the course focuses on specific countries, it also emphasizes an understanding of conceptual tools and methods that form a framework for comparing almost any governments that exist today. Additionally, it requires students to go beyond individual political systems to consider international forces that affect all people in the world, often in very different ways. So what is comparative politics? Most people understand that the term government is a reference to the leadership and institutions that make policy decisions for the country. However, what exactly is politics? Well, politics is basically all about power. So as we look at different countries, we are not only concerned about the ins and outs of how the government works. We will also look at how power is gained, managed, challenged, and maintained. Let's proceed to comparative method. Political scientists sometimes argue about exactly what and how countries should be studied and compared. One approach is to emphasize empirical data based on factual statements and statistics, and another is to focus on normative issues that require value judgments. For example, the first approach might compare statistics that reflect economic development of a group of countries, including information about gross national product, per capita income, and amounts of imports and exports. The second approach might not reject those statistics, but would focus instead on whether or not the statistics bode well or ill for the countries. Empiricists might claim that it is not the role of political scientists to make such judgments, and their critics would reply that such an approach leads to meaningless data collection. Both approaches give us different but equally important tools for analyzing and comparing political systems. Comparisons are based on democracy versus authoritarianism and communism versus capitalism. Newer types of comparisons are reflected in these trends. The impact of informal politics. Governments have formal positions and structures that may be seen on an organizational chart. For example, Great Britain is led by a prime minister and has a House of Lords and a House of Commons. In comparison, the United States has a president, a senate, and a House of Representatives. You may directly compare the responsibilities and typical activities of each position or structure in Britain to its counterpart in the United States. However, you can gain a deeper understanding of both political systems if you connect civil society, the way that citizens organize and define themselves and their interests, to the ways that the formal government operates. Informal politics takes into consideration not only the ways that politicians operate outside their formal powers, but also the impact that beliefs, values, and actions of ordinary citizens have on policy making. The importance of political change. One reason is that the three-world approach has become more problematic in recent years, is that the nature of world politics has changed. After 1991, the World War was no longer dominated by two superpowers, and that fact has had consequences that have reverberated in many areas that no one could have predicted, however, what better? Opportunity to compare the impact of change on different countries. Lastly is the integration of political and economic systems. Even though we may theoretically separate government and politics from the economy, the two are often intertwined almost inextricably. For example, communism and capitalism are theoretically economic systems. But how do you truly separate them from government and politics? Attitudes and behavior of citizens are affected in many ways by economic inefficiency, economic inequality, and economic decision-making. They then may turn to the government for solutions to economic problems. And if the government does not respond, citizens may revolt or take other actions that demand attention from the political elite. Sovereignty, authority, and power. We commonly speak about individuals who are powerful, but in today's world, power is territorially organized into states or countries that control what happens within their borders. What exactly is a state? German scholar Max Weber defined a state as the organization that maintains a monopoly of violence over a territory. In other words, the state defines who can and cannot use weapons and force, and it sets the rules as to how violence is used. States often sponsor armies, navies, and/or air forces that legitimately use power and sometimes violence. But individual citizens are very restricted in their use of force. States also include institutions, a stable, long-lasting organization that helps to turn political ideas into policy. Common examples of institutions are bureaucracies, legislatures, judicial systems, and political parties. These institutions make states themselves long-lasting and often help them to endure even when leaders change. States, by their very nature, exercise sovereignty is the ability to carry out actions or policies within their borders independently from interference either from the inside or the outside. So states today do much more than keep order in society. Many have important institutions that promote general welfare such as health, safe transportation, and effective communication systems and economic stability. The concept of a state is closely related to a nation or a group of people that is bound together by a common political identity. Here, rules that a state sets and follows in exerting its power are referred to collectively as a regime. Regimes endure beyond individual governments and leaders, and we refer to a regime when a country's institutions and practices carry over across time, even though leaders and particular issues change. Legitimacy countries that have no clear answers often suffer from lack of political legitimacy or the right to rule as determined by their own citizens. Political culture and political ideologies. Political culture refers to the collection of political beliefs, values, practices, and institutions that the government is based on. For example, if a society values individualism, the government will generally reflect this value in the way that it is structured and in the way that it operates. If the government does not reflect basic political values of a people, it will have difficulty remaining viable. Political culture also shapes political ideologies that a nation's citizens hold. Political ideologies are sets of political values held by individuals regarding the basic goals of government and politics. Here is the examples of political ideologies. First is the liberalism. Liberalism places emphasis on individual political and economic freedom. As a broad ideology, liberalism is part of the political culture of many modern democracies, including the United States. Liberals seek to maximize freedom for all the people, including free speech, freedom of religion, and freedom of association. Liberals also believe that citizens have the right to disagree with state decisions and act to change the decisions of their leaders. Communism, in contrast to liberalism, generally values equality over freedom, whereas liberal democracies value the ideal of equal opportunity. They usually tolerate a great deal of inequality, especially within the economy. Communism rejects the idea that personal freedom will ensure prosperity for the majority. The third is the socialism. Socialism shares the value of equality with communism but is also influenced by the liberal value of freedom. Unlike communists, socialists accept and promote private ownership and free market principles. Then the next is fascisms, often confused with communism because they both devalue the idea of individual freedom. However, the similarity between the two ideologies ends there. Fascism also rejects the value of equality and accepts the idea that people and groups exist in degrees of inferiority and superiority. Then the last is religions. Religions have always been an important source of group identity and continue to be in the modern world. Many advanced democracies, such as the United States, have established principles of separation of church and state. But even in those countries, religion often serves as the basis for interest groups and voluntary associations within the civil society.